The signal came from a ship that wasn't supposed to exist in the exclusion zone. Orthel Vren stood at his station and let his 4 eyes adjust to the new starfield. The silent denominator had dropped out of fold space 3 minutes ago with the precision VTH engineering had spent 3 centuries perfecting. No vibration, no sound, just the cold math of distance collapsing. And then the stars sat in different places than they had before. The Kepler exclusion zone stretched ahead, a wide belt of dead space that no VTH vessel crossed without authorization from the High Analytic Council, not because it was dangerous. The space itself was empty, unremarkable, hydrogen and cold, and the occasional rock tumbling through the dark. The zone existed because of what lay beyond it. Omens. The VTH had been watching humanity for 40 years. Watching, not contacting. That was doctrine. You observed a species for at least 50 years before you made contact. You learned their patterns, their wars, their disasters, how they handled losing, how they handled winning, whether they learned, whether they stopped. Humanity was 11 years short of the 50-year mark. And yet here the silent denominator sat, on a routine patrol sweep, at the edge of the exclusion zone. And there, on the long-range sensor board, was something that was not supposed to be there. A ship human registry. The IFF signal was faint but readable. ISV Carthage. It floated dark, no running lights, no engine heat, no communications. The kind of silence that in VTH doctrine had one meaning. Already dead. Orthel looked at navigator Yin. Yin was already looking back. Scan it, Orthel said. Yin ran the standard sweep. 30 seconds was normal. Every ship the VTH had ever scanned, across 600 years of expansion, across more than 4,000 species cataloged, had resolved in 30 seconds or less. The scanner swept. The data processed. The threat assessment algorithm filed a tier rating from 1 to 9. They moved on. 30 seconds passed. The scanner kept running. Orthel watched it. He did not say anything. He crossed 2 of his forearms, a stressdel he had not used in 6 years, and waited. Surely it was about to stop. A sensor lag. Background radiation interference. Something simple. 60 seconds. 93 minutes. Yin turned from his station. He spoke very quietly. Sir. Vil was already walking over. The scanner was not malfunctioning. Orthel could see that immediately. The sweep was clean. The data came back in normal parameters. The problem was what the assessment algorithm did with the data once it had it. It sat there, not processing, not filing, not returning an error code, just sitting. The cursor blinked with the patient rhythm of a machine that had run out of road and did not know how to say so. Orthel had never seen this. 22 years of field analysis, 3 different postings across the collective's outer territories, and he had never seen the threat assessment algorithm stop. He pulled the raw feed and started reading. The ship was large, larger than standard human military configurations by a factor of 3. That was the first thing. It was built along lines that VTH analysts had seen in human military records. The long spine, the heavy plating along the forward hull, the weapons arrays. But those weapons arrays were not where they should be for an offensive vessel. They were placed wrong, angled wrong. The geometry was strange. He kept reading. Hull integrity intact. The ship was not dead. It was dark by choice. Every system reading was operational but powered down to minimum, like a person holding their breath. Life signs positive. He ran the count twice. 5,117 individual life signs. Aboard a vessel that his database told him was rated for a crew of just over 1,000. He stared at that number for a long time. 5,000. On a warship. He stopped reading. He stood up straight. Around him, the bridge of the silent denominator had gone very quiet. The kind of quiet that moves through a crew without anyone deciding to be quiet. It just happens when something in the room changes. Communications officer Drev spoke first. She was young. This was her second posting. She had the particular quality that young officers possessed, the ability to ask the question that older officers were too experienced to ask out loud. What's wrong with it? She said. Orthel looked at the blinking cursor on the assessment screen. The machine that had categorized 4,000 species, sitting there with its mouth open, unable to file a report, unable to name the thing it was looking at. I don't know yet, he said. He pulled a chair. He did not usually sit during a scan. Standing was protocol, but the assessment was not coming in, and his legs were starting to carry the particular weight that came when something was wrong in a way he could not name. He started reading from the beginning again, slower this time. The weapon systems first. He wanted to understand the geometry, why the arrays were placed where they were. In standard military doctrine, VTH, human, and every other spacefaring species the collective had cataloged, offensive weapons were positioned for maximum forward firepower. You wanted your guns pointed at the thing you were fighting. These guns were not positioned for forward firepower. They were positioned in a complete perimeter, every array covering a different angle of the ship's exterior, nothing overlapping. The coverage was total. Orthel did the math in his head. Then he did it again, because the first answer seemed wrong. There was no angle of approach to the Carthage that was not covered by at least 2 weapon systems. Every gun faced outward. That was not offensive positioning. That was not the geometry of a ship built to attack. He sat with that for a moment. Then he read the hull layout, the internal configuration. The VTH had detailed records of human warship design. They had been watching for 40 years. They knew where the key systems lived. The bridge, the engine room, the weapons control centers. These were always placed in the ship's most protected zones. The deep interior, shielded by layers of hull and armor. The Carthage followed this. Bridge in the interior, engine room buried deep. But there were other spaces in the deep interior that Orthel did not have a category for. A large room on deck 7, filling 200 square meters, lined with what the scanner identified as furniture arranged in rows. Small furniture. A medical bay, 3 times the standard size for a vessel this class. A second medical bay. A food production facility, large enough to feed 3,000 people a day. A room on deck 12 where the life sign readings were the smallest he had seen, clustered very close together. He checked the thermal signature. Small bodies, warm, many of them. He looked at that for a very long time. Drev was watching him. So was Yen. So was everyone else on the bridge. Because by now they had all stopped doing their jobs and were just watching their senior analyst sit in a chair and stare at a screen and say nothing. Sir, Yen said, the threat assessment still isn't. I know. Orthel did not look up. Leave it. He kept reading. The more he read, the more the shape of the thing shifted in his mind. He would form a theory. This is what this ship is. This is what it's for. And the next line of data would break it. He would form another theory, and the next line would break that one too. A warship carrying civilians. That was his first theory. Hostages, maybe. Or some kind of social practice he had not encountered in the records. The VTH had seen species do strange things with their non-combatants during wartime, but hostages were kept separate, controlled. The scan showed no areas of restriction aboard the Carthage. Every deck was accessible. Every area was open. The civilian life signs were distributed throughout the entire ship, not corralled in one zone. They were not cargo. They were home. He closed the raw feed. He opened his notes file, which he had not used during a scan before. Assessments came from the machine, not from him personally. He started typing his first line. This ship is not configured for war. He looked at that for a moment. Then he typed the second line. This ship is configured for something worse. He did not know exactly what he meant by that yet. He would figure it out. He was going to have to figure it out, because the machine was not going to do it for him, and the High Analytic Council was going to want an answer. And right now, Orthel had nothing to give them except a blinking cursor and a feeling in his secondary chest cavity that he had not felt since his first year in the field. The feeling of being in the presence of something he did not understand. Not dangerous, not yet, maybe not ever. Just unknowable, in the specific way that made everything he thought he knew feel a little bit smaller. The Carthage floated in the dark, running no lights, breathing its low-held breath, its 5,000 lives quiet inside it. Orthel looked at it through the forward viewport. It did not look like a threat. That was the problem. He had been trained to recognize threats. He had a machine that had been built over 6 centuries to recognize threats. Between them, they had never missed one. But the Carthage was not a threat. And it was not a threat. It was something the VTH language did not have a word for yet. Sitting in the dark at the edge of the exclusion zone, waiting with the patience of something that had learned to wait. And Orthel was sitting in his chair with a blinking cursor and a second line of notes he did not fully understand. And the stars were the same as they always were, cold and old, and completely indifferent to the fact that everything was about to change. He pulled up the communication protocols. He was going to need to contact the council. He was going to need more time. And somewhere in the back of his mind, underneath the analyst training and the protocol and the career of clean assessments, something small and old and instinct-shaped was telling him that more time was not going to help, that some things could not be understood from a safe distance, that you had to go closer. He looked at the Carthage one more time, dark still, waiting. He started drafting the council message, and his hands were steadier than he expected them to be. He was not sure if that was professionalism, or if the full weight of the thing had not arrived yet and was still on its way. The council gave him 6 hours. That was fast. 6 hours meant they were paying attention. The standard response window for a field analyst's preliminary report was 48 hours. When the council dropped that to 6, it meant someone in the high chambers had read the opening lines and sat up straighter. Orthel used the 6 hours the way a surgeon used a scalpel, carefully, without wasting. He pulled the full manifest of the ISV Carthage from the raw scan data and began to build it into something readable, not just numbers. A picture, the kind of picture that a council of 12 senior administrators, none of whom had done field work in the last 30 years, could look at and understand. He started with what he knew. The Carthage was a sovereign-class vessel. He had that from the human registry files. Sovereign-class ships were the largest class in the human interstellar navy. They were built for sustained deep space operations, long patrols, extended engagement, the kind of mission that kept a crew away from home for 2, 3, sometimes 4 years at a stretch. Standard crew complement for a sovereign-class vessel, 1,140, all military, all trained, all assigned. Orthel looked at the life sign count again, 5,117. He separated them by category using the scanner's biological data. The scanner could not tell him names or ranks. It could tell him approximate age ranges, body mass, developmental stage. Military personnel, 1,140, exactly as expected. That number matched the registry perfectly. Remaining 4,003. He stared at that number. Over 4,000 people on a warship who were not soldiers, not crew, not military in any classification he had. He broke them down further. Adults healthy working age, approximately 2,300. No military markers in their biology. No elevated stress hormones specific to combat training. These people were not soldiers. They were. He did not have a category. Passengers, civilian, residents, elderly over 70 years by human aging standards, approximately 400, some with medical markers, chronic conditions, several flagged with significant health limitations. Medical cases active, people whose biosignatures showed current illness or injury requiring ongoing care, approximately 900. He cross-referenced. Many of the elderly were also in this category. Some were not elderly. Some were young adults with long-term conditions. Nearly 1,000 people who were sick or hurt or not well, living aboard a warship. And then the last category, 641 individual life signs, whose biological markers put them between the ages of 3 years and 12 years. Children. Orthel sat with that number for longer than he had sat with any of the others. 641 children. On a warship. He thought about the room on Deck 7, the small furniture arranged in rows. He had not known what it was when he first saw it. He knew now. It was a school, a working school inside the hull of a vessel that was carrying enough weapons to crack the crust of a small moon. There was a school 1 floor above the torpedo bay. He built the picture carefully. He laid it out in a grid format that the council would be able to read quickly. Military crew on one side, non-military on the other. The breakdown by age. The breakdown by health status. The locations of the relevant rooms. School, medical bays, food production. The clustered life signs on Deck 12, which his best analysis told him was a sleeping area for the youngest children. Then he built the second picture, the weapons layout. He had been thinking about this since the first read. The positioning of the arrays. He drew it out schematically. The Carthage's hull as a long oval, the weapon placements marked as points around its perimeter. Then he drew the coverage arcs, the angles each array could target. The picture it made was a complete circle, every gun pointing outward, covering every angle, no gaps, no overlap. A perfect ring of firepower arranged around the exterior of the ship. He stared at his own diagram for a long time. He had, over the course of his career, analyzed military configurations for 31 different species. He had learned their doctrines, their tactics, their weapons philosophies. Some preferred overwhelming forward firepower. Some preferred flanking capability. Some spread their weapons evenly for flexible response. Not one of them had configured a warship like this, because this was not a warship configuration. This was a defensive formation. Total. Every weapon protecting the interior of the vessel from every possible direction. Not from one direction. That would be standard rear guard positioning. From every direction all at once, permanently. As if whatever was inside the ship was the most important thing in the universe and needed protecting from every angle, all the time, no matter what. He looked at his life sign breakdown. 641 children, 900 sick or injured, 400 elderly. He looked at the weapon diagram, every gun facing outward. Something rearranged itself in his thinking, like a drawer you had been pushing closed for an hour, finally clicking shut on its own. He understood the configuration now. He did not understand the reason for it yet. Not fully, not in a way he could put clean words to, but the configuration itself made sense now. The geometry was not wrong. It was not strange. It was perfectly logical. It was just the logic of something he had never seen before. He added a third picture to the report. The internal layout, the protected zones, bridge, engine room, weapons control, all in the deep interior. The civilian spaces, school, medical bays, sleeping quarters, also in the deep interior. Not because that was where you put supplies. Because that was where you put what mattered most. The same logic that put the bridge in the center also put the children in the center. The same logic that faced the guns outward toward any threat also, perfectly, faced them outward from the children. He wrote 3 pages of analysis. Then he deleted 2.5 of them because the council did not need his analysis. They needed the data. They could look at the pictures and understand what he understood. What he kept was one paragraph below the 3 pictures. It said, the non-military population aboard the Carthage is not separated from the military operations of the vessel. They are integrated into every deck, every function, every system. The weapon positioning is not offensive. It is protective, covering all exterior angles with no forward bias. This analyst's preliminary conclusion is that the Carthage is not configured as a weapon of war. It is configured as a shelter that has learned to defend itself. The distinction may be significant. He sent the report. Then he sat back and looked at the Carthage through the viewport. Still dark, still quiet, still running that low, held, patient breath. The council's response came in 4 hours, faster than he had expected, even given the shortened window. He opened it. He had expected questions, requests for clarification, possibly a recall order. Come back, file in person. This is too significant for field transmission. Instead, the council had sent one instruction. Initiate contact. Orthel read it twice, then he read it again. Initiate contact was not a standard field analyst's order. Contact protocols were handled by diplomatic teams, by specialist first contact officers, by people with specific training and specific clearances and specific support structures behind them. Orthel was a scanner. He read data. He filed reports. He looked at the instruction again. Initiate contact. He looked at the Carthage. He thought about the school on Deck 7, the small furniture in rows, the 641 life signs clustered in the deep interior of a ship whose every gun pointed outward, protecting what was inside from whatever might come from outside. He thought about what it meant to build something like that, to look at the universe, and decide that the answer was not to hide the things you loved in a safe place far from danger. The answer was to carry them with you and put yourself between them and anything that might come. He thought about what kind of history would produce that answer. He did not fully know. He had the public records. He had 40 years of observation data. He had some understanding of what humans had been through, what had been done to them, what they had survived. But knowing the facts of a history was not the same as understanding what the facts did to a people, what shape they left, what decisions they made that would otherwise seem impossible. He opened the communications channel. He broadcast on the standard first contact frequency that the VTH had used for 6 centuries. Clean signal, universal translation protocol active, his own voice, steady. ISV Carthage. This is Senior Analyst Orthel of the VTH Collective Vessel Silent Denominator. We have been observing your vessel for the past 6 hours. We wish to speak with your commanding officer. He waited. The Carthage sat dark and quiet for 40 seconds. Then its running lights came on all at once. Every light, the whole ship blazing in the dark like something that had been holding its breath and finally let it out. The communications board lit up. A voice came through. Human. Female, with the flatness of someone who did not do anything with their voice except use it to say what needed saying. Analyst, this is Commander Marin of the Carthage. 1 moment. 40 more seconds. Then go ahead. Orthel had prepared an opening statement. A careful, structured introduction. Explanation of the VTH Collective Observation Program. Assurance of peaceful intent. Questions about the vessel's current status and purpose in the exclusion zone. He had it ready. Instead, he said, Commander, I need to understand your ship. A pause. That's a new one, Marin said. I have read your manifest. I have looked at your configuration. I have some questions. Another pause, shorter. I've got time, she said. The kids don't start school for another 3 hours. Orthel looked at his manifest breakdown. At the number 641, he looked at the Carthage, blazing with light now in the dark. I would like to meet, he said. Sure, said Commander Marin. Come over for coffee. He did not know what coffee was. He was going to find out. The part that still keeps me up at night. That comes later. The shuttle bay of the ISV Carthage smelled like machine oil, and something sweet that Orthel could not identify. And a small human in an orange vest that was too large for them waved his shuttle down with the casual authority of someone who had done this 10,000 times, and found it neither impressive nor interesting. He had expected a formal reception. That was VTH protocol. When a dignitary came aboard, you met them with ceremony. A rank display, ranking officers in a line, something that showed you understood the weight of the moment. The small human in the large orange vest pointed at a parking spot and walked away. Orthel stepped off his shuttle and was met by a second human young male, with the look of someone who had been sent on this errand specifically, because he had nothing better to do. Analyst Orthel, the young man said. Yes, Commander Marin's in the secondary mess. I'll take you. Orthel followed him through corridors that were not what he had expected. He did not know exactly what he had expected. Something military, gray, bare. The corridors of a warship in every record the VTH had were functional spaces. Clean lines, nothing extra, everything in service of the ship's purpose. The corridors of the Carthage were also functional, but someone had put drawings on the walls. Not official graphics, not navigational markers or safety information. Drawings. Hand-drawn in what looked like some kind of marking tool directly on the wall. Some were careful, some were not. They were of various sizes and subjects. A landscape with large round-topped trees. A creature that may or may not have been a real animal. A sequence of smaller drawings that appeared to show the same figure in repeating poses, like a very simple animation. In the corner of one very small drawing were the words, Maya, age 7. Orthel almost stopped walking. He kept moving. They passed a corridor where 3 humans were pushing a cart of food supplies, arguing about something in cheerful voices, not lowering those voices because an alien was walking past. They passed an open door behind which a room full of humming machinery contained 2 humans lying underneath it, doing something technical, talking about something that was not the machinery. The young man stopped outside a door marked secondary, Mess B. In there, he said, and walked away. Orthel pushed the door open. The room was large enough to seat perhaps 40 people. At this hour, 0630 by the ship's clock, it was nearly empty. 2 humans sat at one table eating without looking at each other. At the far end, at a table near the viewport, sat a woman alone with a cup in her hands. She was not standing. She was sitting with the cup held in both hands, and she was looking at the viewport. And when Orthel walked in, She turned and looked at him with a face that had seen a great many things and filed them all away without excessive reaction. "Analyst Orthel," she said, "not a question." "Commander Marin." "Sit down," she said. He sat across from her. He looked at the cup. It said, in bright printed letters on its side, "World's Okayest Extinction Preventer." He did not ask. She had not stood. She had not formed a greeting line. She had not displayed rank or ceremony. She was sitting with her cup at 0630, and she had said, "Sit down," the way you said it to someone you had known for years. He found that he was not offended. He found, to his surprise, that it made him feel as though something he had been holding since he first opened the raw scan data was allowed to relax. "You wanted to understand the ship," Marin said. "Yes." "What specifically?" He had his prepared list of questions. He had organized them in order of strategic importance: vessel purpose, civilian population, mission parameters. He had planned to move through them in order. "The civilians," he said instead. Marin took a sip from her cup. She was not rushing. She was not performing calm. She was actually calm in the way of someone for whom calm was not a state they had achieved, but a thing they simply were, because everything else had been used up a long time ago. "What about them?" she said. "Why are they here?" Orthel said. "On a warship. Why are they here and not somewhere safe?" Marin set her cup down. She looked at him. "You've read our history, the public record, 40 years of observation data." She nodded, not surprised. "Then you know what happened to Meridian Station." He knew. He had the record. A civilian habitat, 40,000 people, non-military, positioned in what had been calculated as a strategically irrelevant location, removed from the conflict, safe by design, gone in 4 hours. "Yes," Orthel said, "I know." "And Calloway's world," Marin said. "Yes." "And the Ansari corridor." "Yes." She picked up her cup again. She was not looking at him now. She was looking at the middle distance, the way people looked when they were not seeing what was in front of them but something else, something that lived behind the eyes. "You move them away from danger," she said, "and then the danger finds them anyway, because they're undefended and easy, and because whoever you're fighting knows that if they hit the civilians, you'll fall apart." She paused. "We figured that out after the 3rd time. So you keep them with you." Orthel said, "You keep them with you." Marin said, "Every gun between them and whatever's coming. Every system on this ship in service of keeping those people alive." A pause. "And the enemy knows it. They know that if they want to get to the civilians, they have to go through us first. Through everything we have." Orthel thought about the diagram, the perfect circle of guns all pointing out, the configuration. He said, "I analyzed your weapon placement. It is not designed for offensive engagement." "No," Marin said. "It is designed to protect the interior of the vessel." "Yes, in all directions, simultaneously." She looked at him again. She was looking at him the way someone looked when they were trying to determine whether you were going to understand something or not. "Threats don't come from one direction," she said. "If you're only watching one direction, you've already decided you know where the danger is. We stopped deciding that." Orthel was quiet for a moment. "The children," he said, "in the deep interior in the school." Marin's expression did not change, but something in it settled, like a stone settling to the bottom of still water. "Deck 7, she said. "Yes, that's our most protected space. 8 layers of hull between that deck and open space. Redundant life support. 2 separate power feeds. If everything else on the ship fails, Deck 7 stays running. And you put the school there. And we put the school there." She looked at him steadily. "Where else would we put it?" And Orthel did not have an answer for that. He had thought he was coming here to understand the logic. He had thought there would be an explanation, a tactical reason, a historical policy, some specific decision he could file and understand and put in a report. Instead, she was asking him where else they would put it, and the question sat in the air between them like something obvious that he had just been too far away to see. He thought about every other military vessel he had analyzed in all his years, across all 31 species. The deep interior was always for the systems that kept the ship fighting. Engine cores, weapons control, command infrastructure. The things most worth protecting were the things that kept the weapon running. He looked at Commander Marin of the ISV Carthage, who had put the school in the most protected space on the ship, who sat without ceremony with a cup that called her the world's chaos extinction preventer, who had given him the history of Meridian Station and Calloway's world, and the Ansari corridor in a flat voice that held none of the things she clearly felt about them, because she had put those things somewhere deeper than her voice could reach. "I would like to understand something," Orthel said. "Go ahead. When you made this choice to keep the civilians aboard, in the center of a warship, did you believe it made the ship more effective as a military vessel?" Marin was quiet. "No," she said. "It makes us slower, more careful. There are engagements we can't take because the risk to the ship is too high with civilians aboard. Maneuvers we can't run." She paused. "It limits us militarily." "Then why?" "Because a military is only worth what it's defending," she said. "You want me to explain the logic? The logic is, what's the point of winning if what you were protecting isn't there anymore?" She picked up her cup. "We've won battles," she said quietly. "We've won battles and then gone to tell the people we were fighting for about it, and the people weren't there anymore." A pause. "We don't do that now." Orthel sat with that. Outside the viewport, the stars were the same as they always were, cold and old and patient. "I would like to see the ship," he said. Marin looked at him over her cup. "The weapon systems," she said. "No," he said. "The school." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up, the first time she had stood since he arrived. And she picked up her cup and she said, "It doesn't start for another 2 hours, but I can show you the room." He followed her out of the mess and into the corridor, past a drawing on the wall that said Maya, age 7, in the corner. His 4 eyes moved to it as he passed. He did not say anything about it. Neither did she. It sat between them, understood, the way most of the important things in this conversation had been. Deck 7 was not what he had expected. He did not know exactly what he had expected. Something that felt different from the rest of the ship. Maybe something that announced itself. Here is the place we put the children. Notice the softness. Notice the care. Instead, Deck 7 felt like the rest of the ship. Same floors. Same ceiling height. Same hum of the ventilation system. The corridors were the same width and the same gray-green color, and had the same utility conduits running along the upper edges, except that someone had painted the utility conduits blue. Not carefully, not professionally, the brush strokes were visible. Some of the paint had dripped and dried in small streaks down the wall, but the conduits were blue now, and between them the wall was covered in drawings. Handprints, small ones pressed in paint, names in small letters: Thomas H. Silan, Sophia age Num, Kofi age Dalapan, Priya age Lima. 2. Orthel walked slowly. Commander Marin walked beside him without speaking. She had the easy silence of someone comfortable in a space, not because it was quiet, but because she had been here enough that being here was normal. They passed a door with a paper sign taped to it. Hand-lettered, reading corner, shoes off. Below that, in different handwriting, younger and rounder. And socks too. Marin noticed him looking at it. "Ship's librarian put the first sign up," she said. 6-year-old named Dev added the socks part. "We kept it." "How long ago?" 3 years. A pause. "Dev just turned 9. The sign was still there. The school room itself was at the end of the corridor. The door was open. Marin had said it did not start for 2 hours, and she was right. The room was empty of children, but empty of children was not the same as empty. Orthel stepped into the doorway. The room was not large, perhaps 200 square meters, which matched the scanner's reading. Rows of small tables arranged in a pattern that was not quite a grid, more of a loose gathering, as if whoever had set them up had done it by feel rather than by measurement. Small chairs at each table, a paper-wrapped object that his translator identified as a standard human writing tool called a crayon. The walls. He took a moment with the walls. He had seen drawings in the corridors. These were more. Every surface covered. Children's work, drawings in crayon and paint applied with fingers and cut paper shapes pasted in clusters, but also written things. A large display near the front with letters of the human alphabet, upper and lower case. A map of the primary human settled systems with small markers on several locations. A handmade poster with the words in large letters, "We are still here." And below that, in smaller letters, a list of names. He read some of the names on the list. Meridian Station, Calloway's World, Ansari Corridor. 41 other names he did not recognize, but whose presence on a poster made by hand and pinned above where children sat every day told him what they were. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Marin stood beside him and said nothing. There was a bookshelf along one wall, low, child height, packed with physical books printed on paper. The kind the VTH records said humans still made, even though they had better options, because something about the object itself mattered to them in a way they had never entirely stopped needing. On the edge of the bookshelf, someone had stuck a small paper flag, not a nation's flag, a drawing of one, blue background, white circle, and inside the circle, very small and carefully done, a picture of a ship. He recognized the ship. He looked at the ceiling. Someone had pasted small shapes up there, the luminescent kind, 5 pointed stars and others, arranged not randomly, but in patterns he recognized after a moment as actual constellations, human constellations, the ones you would see from Earth, which was a planet most of the children in this room had probably never been to, arranged so that when the lights went out, the children lying on their rest mats, there was a stack of rolled mats against the far wall, would look up and see the sky of a place they had never seen. He felt something move through him that he did not have an immediate name for. Then the children arrived. Not in a group, not in a line, they came the way children came everywhere, in 2s and 3s and 1s, some running, some walking with the serious gravity of a person carrying an important backpack, some talking, some not. Marin checked the time. She looked surprised. Early today, she said, almost to herself. The teacher came in behind them, a tall human with close-cut gray hair and a sweater that had seen better years. She saw Orthel in the doorway, and her face showed in sequence. Surprise, then a calm, neutral expression that he suspected she used for unexpected things in general. Analyst Orthel, Marin said to the teacher. He asked to see the school. Good morning, the teacher said. I'm Instructor Vale. We're starting in a few minutes. You're welcome to come in. He came in. He stood near the back wall, beside a large crayon drawing of what appeared to be a space battle between two ships, except that both ships appeared to be smiling. The children came in around him. Most of them looked at him once. A few looked at him twice. One very small child stopped directly in front of him and looked up with the complete unashamed examination that only very small children performed without any social filter. You have 4 eyes, the child said. Yes, Orthel said. The child considered this. Does that make things more visible? Yes, somewhat. The child nodded, apparently satisfied, and went to find a seat. The class began. Instructor Vale, without ceremony, stood at the front and said, Long division. Who remembers where we stopped yesterday? Several hands went up. Several did not. There was, in the 3rd row, a girl with her hair in 2 uneven braids. She was bent over her worksheet with the focused intensity of someone in a private war with a mathematics problem. She had not looked at Orthel. She looked up now. She looked at him. She looked at Marin. She looked at Orthel again. You missed show and tell, she said, with the full weight of wounded civic responsibility. That was yesterday, Orthel said. Yes, the girl said. A simple statement of fact about a failing. She returned to her worksheet. He stood against the back wall of the school on deck 7 of the ISV Carthage, which was sitting in the dark of the Kepler exclusion zone, with every gun pointing outward, and he listened to 31 human children between 6 and 9 years old learn long division. 2 of them argued quietly about a crayon. One fell off his chair and climbed back up with the unbroken dignity of someone determined that this had not happened. One child raised her hand and asked a question about long division that was so precise that Instructor Vale paused and answered it carefully. And Orthel, standing in the back, found himself listening to the answer. The room smelled like crayons and recycled air, and something else underneath, a faint residue that his senses identified after a moment as the same cleaning compound he had noticed when they passed the armory on deck 6. 1 floor below, the same compound, the same air, the armory and the school breathing together one above the other, separated by 8 layers of hull and a ceiling covered in glowing stars, arranged to look like home. And then it was fully in him, the thing that had been building since he first opened the raw scan data, since the machine refused to file a report, since he had sat across from Commander Marin and she had said, "What's the point of winning if what you were protecting isn't there anymore?" The VTH had a word. Threnova. Untranslatable. Technically, the closest meaning was the thing a creature does when it has decided the universe does not get to win. VTH scholars applied it to mountain ranges that stood unchanged while everything around them eroded, to stars that held their cores together past any reasonable expectation, to large old geological things. They had never applied it to a species. He had been looking at this wrong. He had been looking at the guns, at the hull plating, at the weapons payload, at the defensive positioning, at the 5,000 life signs, at the perfect circle of firepower. He had been trying to understand the armor. He had not been looking at the thing the armor was for. 31 children doing long division, 2 of them sharing a crayon. Now, the argument resolved without intervention. The girl with the uneven braids, no longer looking at him, back in her private war with the worksheet. This was it. Not the ship, not the weapons, not the tactics or the history or the configuration or the doctrine. This room, this smell of crayons and recycled air and armory compound. This ceiling with its pasted stars showing a sky these children had never seen. This was what the guns were for. And the guns were very good at their job. He looked at Commander Marin, who was standing near the door with her cup and her still expression, watching him the way you watched someone when you knew they were understanding something, and you were waiting to see if they were going to understand it right. He looked away. He looked at the poster on the wall. We are still here. Below it, the list of places that were not still here. Below that, every day, 31 children sat and learned long division under the stars of a home most of them had never seen, in the most protected room on a ship that had decided that protecting this was the only war that mattered. He thought about what he was going to write in his report. He thought he was going to need a new section. The VTH First Contact form had not been updated in 200 years. It had fields for species classification, technological assessment, military threat tier, diplomatic recommendation. It was a thorough document. It had been sufficient for every species the collective had ever encountered. It did not have a field for this. He was going to have to make one. Orthel stayed until the end of class. He did not take notes. He did not ask questions. He stood against the back wall and watched 31 children learn long division under a ceiling of pasted stars. And he tried to understand what it meant to build a room like this inside a vessel that could crack a moon. When the class ended, the children left the way they had come, in 2s and 3s and 1s. Some waved at Instructor Vale, one waved at Marin, none waved at Orthel, which he found he did not mind. The girl with the uneven braids walked past him without looking up, still carrying her worksheet like a document of unfinished business. Marin was waiting by the door. Well, she said, not a question. I would like to see the rest of the ship, Orthel said. You've seen what matters. I would like to understand how it works, the integration, the systems. She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her cup which she had set on a small table by the door, and she said, all right, but I have a meeting in 40 minutes. You'll get the fast version. He got the fast version. Marin walked him through the medical bays, both of them. The primary bay was standard military configuration, expanded to handle trauma from engagement. The secondary bay was different, quieter, designed for long-term care, chronic conditions, pediatric monitoring. Orthel counted the beds, 47. All occupied. They passed the food production facility. 3,000 meals a day, Marin said without looking at him. Grown, synthesized, prepared, distributed. The facility ran continuously. It had never shut down in 6 years of operation. 6 years, Orthel said. 6 years since we stopped using safe harbors, Marin said. 6 years since we decided the only safe place was the one we carried with us. They passed the engine room, buried deep, as expected, redundant systems, triple-core power, the kind of engineering that kept a sovereign-class vessel operational for decades without resupply. And everywhere in every corridor the same pattern, military personnel moving with purpose, civilians moving with purpose of a different kind, a woman carrying a child and a stack of printed paper, an elderly man adjusting a wall-mounted display that showed, Orthel realized, a schedule of some kind. Not military, not operational, a community calendar. No one stopped because an alien was walking past. No one stared. No one asked. They had seen aliens before, Orthel realized, or they had decided that whatever was happening was not their concern. Either way, the normalcy was not performed. It was actual. The 40 minutes ended at the secondary mess. Marin checked her cup, which was empty now, and she said, "I have to go. You'll find your own way back to the shuttle bay." "Yes," Orthel said. "Good," she said. And she walked away without ceremony, the same way she had greeted him, as if the meeting had been ordinary, as if he had been ordinary. He found his way back through corridors he now recognized, past the drawing that said Maya, age 7, past the 3 humans still arguing about the food cart, though the cart was different now. The supplies changed. Past the open door where the 2 humans were still lying underneath machinery, though they had moved to a different machine. The small human in the orange vest was not in the shuttle bay. Another small human, different one, pointed at his shuttle and walked away. He sat in his shuttle for 3 minutes before starting the engine. He did not know what he was feeling. The VTH had precise words for emotional states. He ran through them. None fit. The closest was a word used for geological events, the slow pressure that built before a tectonic shift, the kind of force that did not announce itself until the ground moved. He flew back to the silent denominator. The report was 11 pages. Orthel wrote the first 10 on the shuttle back. He wrote them in the clean, precise format that the VTH High Analytic Council required for first contact submissions: taxonomy, technology assessment, behavioral analysis, military evaluation, diplomatic recommendation. He used the correct field headers. He cited his scanned data. He attached the diagrams. 10 pages in 4 hours. That was fast for him. He was not a fast writer. He was a careful one. The 11th page took 6 hours. He sat in his cabin and looked at the blank document field and thought about how to say what he needed to say. He thought about Commander Marin and her cup. He thought about the girl with the uneven braids. He thought about the poster on the wall of Deck 7. He wrote the 11th page once, deleted it. He wrote it again, deleted most of that. He looked at what was left and decided it was the most honest thing he had written in his career, which was not the same as being good, but was perhaps more important than being good. He sent the report. He went asleep. When he woke up, 3 things had happened. The first was that the council had read the report. The red receipt had come in 2 hours after submission, which for a council transmission meant someone had been waiting for it. The second was that Navigator Yin had come to his cabin door at some point in the night and left a cup of the hot liquid the humans called coffee outside it. Yin had apparently gone to some effort to source it from somewhere. Orthel drank it standing in his doorway while reading the council's response. It was bitter, too hot. He drank it anyway. The third was that the council's response was not what he had expected. He had expected deliberation. He had expected the formal process. 30 days for a full council review, preliminary committees, a request for secondary analysis from another field team, possibly a full diplomatic mission assembled from the appropriate departments. The council had convened in full session. In 200 years, they had not done that for a first contact. The last time was the Drath War, which had cost 40,000 VTH lives and reshaped the borders of the collective for a century. 12 senior administrators, all 12, in the same chamber, reading an 11-page report from a field analyst who had spent 3 hours in a school and come back not entirely sure how to file a threat tier. The response was 3 paragraphs. The first acknowledged the report. The second approved the initiation of full diplomatic contact with humanity, skipping the standard observation completion requirement 11 years early, with a citation of exceptional circumstances. The third paragraph was shorter than the others. It said, "The 11th page of Analyst Orthel's report is entered into the permanent record of the collective. The designation Threnova is formally extended to include species-level application. The standing taxonomy of civilizational classifications is to be updated accordingly. A new category is required. Analyst Orthel is requested to name it." He read that 3 times. Then he drank the rest of the coffee. It was cold now. He drank it anyway. The formal diplomatic contact took 3 months to establish. Orthel was not part of the diplomatic team. He was, as he had always told himself, a scanner. He filed his reports. He answered the questions the diplomatic team sent him. He gave his analysis of Commander Marin's communication style and the behavioral patterns he had observed aboard the Carthage. He did not go back. He thought about going back. He did not. He was transferred back to standard patrol rotation, a different sector, a new posting. He packed his things and walked through the corridors of the silent denominator for the last time and thought, as he had been thinking for weeks, about Deck 7, about the ceiling with the pasted stars, about the poster on the wall, about a girl with 2 uneven braids telling him with calm civic authority that he had missed show and tell. 6 weeks after the full diplomatic contact was established, 17 VTH families filed a petition with the collective's New Human Relations Division. Not a military petition, not a diplomatic one, a request for access. The families had read the public portions of the first contact report. They had read the sections about the Carthage's civilian population, the social integration, the medical facilities, the education programs. They had read about the human civilian aid networks that operated alongside the military vessels, the supply chains, the medical exchanges, the school systems running in deep space. They did not want access to the military operations. They wanted to connect with the maternity wards. 17 VTH families, most of them with young children or expecting, who had read about how humans built family life inside deep space operations and wanted to learn. How do you raise children in transit? How do you build a school in a ship? How do you make a home out of something that moves? The Human Relations Division approved the request. The humans said, yes, of course, come on over. The first VTH family to board the Carthage was met in the shuttle bay by the small human in the orange vest, who pointed them at a parking spot and walked away. They followed a young crew member through corridors with blue-painted utility conduits and drawings covering every wall. They stopped at a doorway with a paper sign reading corner, shoes off, and below that, in rounder letters and socks, too, the VTH child who had come with her parents, 4 years old, wide first set of eyes, completely unintimidated by anything, read the sign carefully. We have to take our socks off, she said. Apparently, said her father. She sat down in the corridor and began removing her socks with the total focused dedication that 4-year-olds brought to sock removal. A human child appeared from around the corner, looked at her, sat down beside her, and also began removing her socks. They did not speak the same language yet. They sat in the corridor and took off their socks. The ISV Carthage left the Kepler exclusion zone 40 days after Orthal's first scan. It did not leave in darkness. Its running lights were on full and warm, and it had added something. In those 40 days, someone had painted the hull, not the whole hull, a section of it along the port side, in the wide flat space between 2 weapons arrays where the plating was smooth. A mural. Orthal saw it on the final scan before the Carthage folded out. He pulled the image into his files and looked at it for a long time. It was hand-painted. The lines were not perfectly even. The scale shifted in places, larger in some areas, smaller in others. It was the work of many hands over many hours, possibly many days. It showed ships, not the Carthage, other ships. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, rendered small, crowded carefully into the available space with the particular accumulation of something being accounted for. Each one slightly different, each one identifiable if you looked closely enough as a specific vessel. Ships the Carthage had pulled from debris fields. Ships it had shielded from fire. Ships it had towed to safety when they could no longer move on their own. Ships whose people were alive because of what the Carthage had put between them and whatever was coming. Every ship, all of them rendered small and meticulous and real. At the bottom of the mural, in large letters that could be read from several kilometers out, 3 words. Orthal's translator processed them. We were here. Not we were here as in this is where we stood. Not we were here as in mark this location. He understood the tense. He understood what the past tense was doing. Many of these ships were gone now. Their people might be alive. The ships were not. The mural was not for the ships that still existed. It was for the ones that did not. A monument on the hull of a living ship, moving through space, carrying it forward. We were here, and so we carry you. He looked at the mural for a long time. Then he opened the new category field that the council had created, and that he had been trying to name for 6 weeks. The field sat blank, waiting. The entire taxonomy of the VTH collective civilizational database on one side of it, and this, whatever this was, on the other. He thought about the school, the poster, the armory compound in the recycled air. He thought about what it meant to be broken and to keep going, not because you had healed, but because you had decided that the breaking did not get the final word. He thought about a monument on the hull of a ship that was still moving. He typed 2 words into the field. He submitted it. The category went into the permanent taxonomy of the VTH collective, where it would sit beside the 4,000 other species classifications, and where researchers would read it for the next 2 centuries and debate whether it was precise enough, whether it was scientific enough, whether it captured what it was supposed to capture. He thought it did. The 2 words were persistent witness, a civilization that had been broken repeatedly and had responded not by hardening past the breaking, not by building walls high enough to stop the grief, but by putting the grief on the hull and flying it forward, by naming the lost, by carrying the names, by walking into the next danger with the last danger still written on their skin, not because they had made peace with loss, because they had not, because they had decided that not making peace with it was the only honest response. And that honest response was also somehow the one that kept them going. He saved the file. He looked out the viewport. The space where the Carthage had been was empty now. Stars, cold, old. He thought about a girl with uneven braids doing long division. He thought about a paper sign on a door, 3 years old, still there. He thought about 45 names on a wall above where children sat every day. He thought about the ceiling, the glowing stars, the sky of a home most of them had never seen, pasted up there so that when the lights went out, they could look up and know where they came from. He picked up the coffee cup. It was cold. He drank it anyway.